My wife Leah has the most beautiful blue eyes that I have ever seen. From the very first moment that we met, those ice blue marbles of hers knocked me off my feet. She always gets compliments about them whenever the two of us go out, and she never lacks for comments whenever she posts a photo on Instagram. I bring this up because something truly bizarre began to happen shortly after we moved into our new home. A few months ago, we purchased a quaint little Victorian fixer-upper on a small piece of property out in the countryside. Nothing extravagant, just a couple of acres for the two of us to get some fresh air. The majority of the property was comprised of a long, winding driveway in the front of the house, so the acreage didn't really account for a whole lot. I'm a fairly established editorial writer for an online media website, so my work can easily be done anywhere where we can get electricity and a stable Wi-Fi connection. And my wife is the social media manager of a fairly prominent construction company, so her work is entirely remote as well. We had decided that since we are both in our 30s with no kids and no offices to tie us to the big city, now would be the opportune time to find somewhere where we could get away from the bustle of society and enjoy each other's company. A friend of a friend introduced us to the real estate agent that had recently sold their parents a vacation home, and before we knew it, the agent had sent us a listing that he thought would be exactly what we were looking for. A few days later, we were driving up the winding driveway to what would soon be our first real home together. The transition from cramped little city apartments with sirens and artificial lights to the warm glow of a sunset viewed from the comfort of a rocking chair on your back patio is truly mind-blowing. Sure, the house was a little on the older side and would need a touch of fixing up, but from the moment we walked in the front door, we both knew this was where we wanted to live. It wasn't long before we had finished moving in, and the last of the boxes had finally been unpacked. One of my favorite features of the house was the expansive entryway that you'd be greeted with upon entering the front door, which included a remarkable stained glass window above the door and a decorative ornate mirror directly off to the side as soon as you walked in. The mirror had been tightly affixed to the wall itself, so I just assumed that it had been too much of a hassle for the previous owners to remove and take with them. One of the final touches Leah and I had put into furnishing our new home was to place a rustic-looking wooden credenza right beneath the mirror, as a place for us to set our keys, wallets, and anything else we might need before heading out of the door. It felt almost ceremonious for us to retrieve our keys from the bowl on the credenza every time we got ready to leave. I may sound a bit theatrical, but the house almost made me feel a bit like royalty. After only a week, Leah had gotten into the habit of primping in front of the large mirror before we'd go out and do anything. I'd patiently wait on the couch in the next room and admire her as she fixed her hair and inspected her reflection. That's when I started to notice something strange. One day while I was waiting for her to finish getting ready to go out, I was sitting on the couch with my phone. I was scrolling through the numerous emails I had received from work because my coworkers were all incompetent apparently. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Aaliyah walk up to the mirror to do her customary final checks. I looked up, asking if she was nearly ready, and she turned, rolling those stunning blue eyes at me, before giving me an annoyed smirk. I returned an amused sigh and shook my head, turning my attention back onto my phone. However, just as my eyes dropped down to the tiny screen, I realized I had briefly spotted something out of place. Have you ever spotted something unusual or something that doesn't quite register correctly in your mind? Well, it was like that. I snapped my eyes back up to confirm what I had spotted. My wife's reflection in the mirror appeared to have emerald green eyes, not blue, staring back at her. I shut my own eyes tightly, wondering if my phone had perhaps strained my vision somehow. I opened them again and I brought it to my wife's attention, but she just laughed it off. She told me that it was probably the natural lighting coming through the stained glass window above the door, and that it was tinting her reflection. I considered the possibility, and before I could press further, she turned to me asking how she looked. Her dazzling blue eyes stared at me expectantly. Caught off guard by the sudden question, I dismissed the bizarre situation entirely. I complimented her appearance and we headed out for the evening. Over the next few weeks, we'd share many moments of her stopping to fix a stray hair or apply new lipstick in the walkway mirror, only for me to notice the stark difference in the color of her reflection's eyes yet again. I would also find myself desperately sneaking glances in the mirror of my own eyes when she wasn't around, only to find that my eyes were always the exact same shade of brown they had always been. I had trouble shaking the feeling, but life goes on, and we otherwise settled into the new place seamlessly. Then, one Friday morning, I had woken up alone in our bed. This was odd because I was usually the first one to get up in the morning. I called out to Leah asking where she was and what she was doing. After hearing no response, I got out of bed and wandered throughout the large house. It didn't take me long to realize that I was in fact alone. I was about to call Leah's phone, but before I pushed send, I realized my ignorance. Leah's father had gotten ill recently, and she had been planning on heading to her parents' house a few hours away for a weekend to spend some time with them. It had completely slipped my mind, and I didn't want to get another earful about how forgetful I am. I spent pretty much the entire weekend cooped up in my home office, writing, editing, and submitting. I had somehow condensed an entire month's worth of work into 3 days. During that time, I had been able to lose myself so deeply in my writing that I hadn't even checked my phone or remembered to text Leah to confirm when she would be home. By the time Sunday rolled around, I was finally able to pull myself away from my computer. It was then that I realized I hadn't heard anything from Leah for the whole weekend. It was then that I began to check my phone in the hopes that Leah had either messaged me or left a voicemail. I had received no such notifications. I dialed her number to make sure everything was alright, but I was immediately sent to her voicemail. By this point, my concerns had slowly started to rise. It wasn't like Leah to turn her phone off completely, especially when traveling alone. I then decided to call up my father-in-law to see if she had left later than anticipated, hoping for a jovial anecdote about Leah's clumsiness, leading to a broken cell phone during her visit or something of that nature. Leah's father, Walter, sounded confused yet grateful for my sudden call upon answering. I asked him if Leah was on her way back home after the visit with him, which garnered a bewildered response. After a very brief pause, he asked me what I was talking about. He mentioned that he hadn't seen Leah all weekend, that she was supposed to come visit but never showed, and he just assumed that she had work or wasn't feeling well herself. His confusion quickly turned to worry when he asked me if I knew where she was. A chill shot down my spine at the thought of my wife being missing. If she hadn't gone to visit her father and she wasn't answering her cell phone, there was no telling where she might be or what might have happened to her. After I ended my phone call with Walter, I tried to collect my racing thoughts and panic before deciding what to do next. I assumed that I should probably notify the police as soon as possible, and began to mentally make notes of all the places she might have gone to. That's when suddenly, I was snapped from my panicked state by the sound of keys turning in the front door, and the door swinging open downstairs. My heart thudded in my chest, and I gasped with relief as I ran down the stairs to the familiar sound of her shoes on the entryway floor. She set her bag down on the floor next to the front door, and I wrapped my arms around her, holding her tightly against me. I asked her where she had been, and she mentioned that she had gone to see her father, that she had told me about this trip weeks ago. I paused, but not just because of the blatant lie she had just told me, but because she was staring at me with 2 piercing green eyes. She told me she was tired after her long trip and was going to head off to bed early. I couldn't find my voice to answer her. I just returned a stunned nod. Just before she ascended the steps to the bedroom, however, she stopped to check her appearance in front of the large mirror in the entryway. I felt ice flow through my veins as I saw that her reflection now has bright blue eyes instead of green.